Before you sign up for another course, pursue another credential, launch another side hustle, or decide that you need an entirely new network, stop for a moment because the opportunity you are looking for may already be sitting inside your current life. It may be the relationships you have not activated, the credibility you have not communicated, or the ideas that you have not yet packaged. Ambitious people often assume that the next level requires something brand new. Sometimes the real problem is that you lack, not that you lack resources, it is that you have not fully recognized, organized, or deployed the resources you already possess. In this episode, I'll show you how to do a personal leverage audit across 7 different areas. The goal is to identify what you can activate now to create long-term optionality. Welcome to the Do Different Better show. Let's take inventory. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show, where we examine the beliefs, behaviors, systems, and strategies that shape how we build success, wealth, agency, and lives that actually belong to us. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, Managing Director of the Integrated Capital Investment Fund and CEO of Do Different Better. In the last episode, I established that effort, advantage, access, and leverage are not the same. Effort is the labor that you contribute on an hour-by-hour basis. Advantage improves your position. Access gets you closer to an opportunity. And leverage allows an existing resource to produce a result greater than your direct effort alone could create. Welcome, my leverage builders. Today, I am going to make that idea personal. I'm going to have you examine the leverage you already have, because one of the most expensive habits ambitious people developed is the habit of constantly looking outside themselves for the next missing thing. It's another certification. It's another degree. It's another course. It's another mentor. It's another job or multiple jobs. It's another platform. It's another strategy, another social media channel, and another planner. I am guilty of that. I am the planner queen. But sometimes I find myself after a couple of weeks, I'm not using it anymore. We assume the future is being withheld because we lack something. Sometimes that is true. But sometimes the problem is not a resource deficit. It is a resource recognition problem. Again, raising my hand, I've been there. You possess knowledge you have never packaged. You have relationships you've allowed to go dormant. You have credibility you do not communicate. You have work you have never recognized as intellectual property. You have income that supports consumption but has not yet been systematically converted into ownership in any meaningful way. You have experiences you dismiss because they came naturally to you or occurred a long time ago. You have assets you may not recognize as assets because they do not look like cash in a brokerage account. I'll tell a quick story. I had last year, I hosted a 8-week class with 12 women, and a couple of the women came into the workshop saying, I don't have any money. I don't have anything, but I really want this information for when I get money. By the time we were done with the course, during the course, she had shared that one of the women had shared that she had a $17,000 bill. She had a credit card that was $17,000. And she didn't know, she was just paying like very, very little over the minimum payment, which meant she was going to be paying on this forever. And I said, well, wait a minute. I knew that in the course of conversation, she had talked about she had a home. And I said, well, how long have you been in your home? And she told me it had been almost 20 years. I said, well, I am pretty sure you have equity built into your home. You can actually borrow against the equity at a much lower rate than what you have on your credit card. And so she was able to do that and wipe out her debt. She was paying 1/3 of the interest that she was paying on her credit card to now pay down this debt. And so now she's actually going to be paying it off in a reasonable amount of time. Once again, because she felt she didn't have cash in the bank, she felt that she did not have any assets. So this is a mindset shift to really thinking about more expansively about what you have as far as resources and assets. But today I'm going to be talking about doing an audit across 7 different categories of leverage. The goal is not to produce a long list that makes you feel accomplished for about 5 minutes. The goal is to identify what resources can be activated strategically, because inventory without deployment is not leverage. It's a big storage unit, right? So let's now start to get into this. And I'm going to be talking about skills, experience, and relationships. The first category is skills. A skill is an ability you can reliably use to produce a result. Skills may be technical, they can be strategic, they can be creative, they can be interpersonal, they can be operational, financial, analytical, managerial, communicative, or relational. And sometimes I call relational magical, right? You just magically have a way of getting things done. Most people underestimate their skills for 3 reasons. First, competence becomes invisible to the person who possesses it. Have you ever seen somebody who's got raw, natural talent and they're just like, but I've always been able to do this? And you're like, do you know that most people can't do that? Right? What is difficult for others may feel ordinary to you. Second, many of your strongest skills may never have appeared in your formal job description. You may be the person who calms the room, translates complexity, is able to see risk where no one else can, quickly identifies pattern. That's me. You're able to build trust, make decisions under pressure. Maybe you've been called a good connector. You repair broken systems. You turn abstract into ideas into executable plans. Third, people frequently describe activities instead of outcomes. You might be saying, I manage projects. That's an activity. Or I bring delayed cross-functional projects back under control. That describes a value. I coach people. It's very broad. I help senior leaders identify the behavior undermining their authority and change it, is more specific. So now let's talk about skill audit questions. Here's what you can ask. What do people consistently ask me to help them solve? What do I do faster or more efficiently than most people around me? What problems have I solved repeatedly? What can I teach? What can I diagnose? What can I improve? What can I create? What can I lead? What can I negotiate? What can I simplify? Which of my skills are directly connected to revenue, cost savings, risk reduction, access, or decision quality? Then ask the leverage question. Could this skill become a premium service, workshop, product, framework, leadership role, board contribution, or negotiating advantage? A skill becomes leverage when it is recognized, positioned, and applied into a high value problem. Category 2, experience. Experience is not simply how long you have been alive or employed. Experience includes industries you understand because you've worked deeply in them, problems you have survived, organizations you have built or contributed to the building, transitions you have managed, markets you have observed, mistakes you have made, crises you have navigated, communities you specifically understand, systems you've operated within, patterns you can now recognize earlier than most. Your experience gives you judgment and discernment. And judgment can be extremely valuable because it helps people avoid expensive mistakes. But experienced people often undervalue their judgment because it cannot always be reduced to a simple procedure and is not necessarily tangible. You may walk into a meeting and recognize within 15 minutes that the partnership will fail. That is not intuition floating in from the heavens. It may be pattern recognition built through 20 years of observing misaligned incentives, poor communication, weak governance, and unrealistic expectations. Maybe you're not even able to put your finger on it specifically, but now I want you to start noticing so that you can. Experience audit questions that you can ask are, what have I done for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years? What have I seen repeatedly? What mistakes can I now recognize early? What situations no longer intimidate me? What industries or communities do I understand from the inside? What have I learned through failure that others would pay to avoid? Where do I possess judgment that is more than just simply information? Then I want you to ask, who would benefit economically or strategically from the judgment I have developed? Maybe it's a certain area, maybe it's a certain industry, maybe it's a certain job title. Experience becomes leverage when it helps someone make a better decision, avoid loss, enter a new market or penetrate the existing market, navigate a transition, reduce risk, accelerate implementation, build, build trust within a community, and recognize what others have missed. Category number 3, relationships. Your relationship network is not the same as a contact list. I talked a lot about this on the previous episode. A contact is someone whose information you possess. A relationship contains some level of trust, familiarity, reciprocity, and shared experience, but also mutual respect, credibility, and access. Relationship capital may include things like former colleagues, former client or current clients, current and past vendors, mentors, sponsors, board members, alumni, community leaders, investors, industry peers, professional association contacts, people you have helped, people who understand your character and competence. Many people either underuse or misuse their relationships. Here's what underuse sounds and looks like. I don't want to bother anyone. Sound familiar? Misuse sounds like, I have not spoken to you in 7 years, but can you introduce me to your CEO by Friday? Think about, would you do that? Probably not. So don't expect somebody else to. Relationship leverage is not transactional extraction. It is ethical activation of trust. Now, here's some relationship audit questions. Who knows the quality of my work? Distinctly, specifically. Who trusts my judgment? Who has referred me before or made introduction? Who controls influence or opportunities that are towards my goal? Whose work do I genuinely support? Whose relationship have gone dormant? What have I been generous and unclear about in what I'm building? Who should know what I'm doing next? What introductions can I credibly request? And what introductions could someone else offer? Your network cannot advocate for a future it does not know that you are pursuing. You may need to become more explicit, not desperate, not performative. That's not what we're talking about, but explicit. I am doing this and would like that, right? I'm working on a new workshop. I'm working on a new template. I'm working on XYZ, and I would like an introduction to somebody who could possibly buy this, who this could actually be of use. I noticed in the news that they were having this problem. I have a solution. I'd love to introduce my solution to them, right? That is far more meaningful and far more credible. So, we've just spent this time talking about relationships and how you may be using or misusing or underusing your relationship, and how that is a part of your leverage, not only in your professional life, but as part of your wealth building strategy to what the goals that you've established for yourself. You're listening to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Do Better with Elaine. And don't forget, if you're just coming to the show, take my wealth identity and wealth capacity quizzes on my website at www.dodifferentbetter.com. I will see you after the break. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show, my leverage opportunity builders. You are listening to the Do Different Better show, and I am your host and money and wealth co-pilot, Elaine Rasmussen. Thanks for joining me. We talked about in the first segment the first three categories of leverage and leveraging relationships. Now we're going to go into the next four components. The next category, category four, is we're talking about credibility. Credibility is accumulated evidence that you can be trusted to provide a result, exercise sound judgment, or uphold a standard. I know for me, when people say to me, one of the things that they think about is, I'm always going to say the quiet part out loud. I'm going to do it respectfully, but I'm always going to say the thing that is unsaid, especially if I think that that unsaid thing is what's getting in the way of us making forward progress in a conversation, in a negotiation, or whatever, or coming to a joint resolution, right? Whatever that resolution is, whether it's a contract, whatever it is, right? We're trying to get to some common ground. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. And so people have distinguished that particular attribute with me. So when they are looking for somebody who is going to be very transparent in a process, that's when I will get called in. I'll get called in for my facilitation skills. I'll get called in to work for my coaching, working with high net worth individuals. People say, hey, if you really want the truth, but you want it in a way that's going to feel palatable, call Elaine, right? But I've now built up a reputation. I've built up a reputation for being strategic. I've built up a reputation of delivering excellence always and in all ways. And so when people call on me, that's the brand that I'm selling. That's the expectation. That's the predictable outcome that they're looking for. So when people make introductions to me or for me, that's what they know that they are going to be transferring to that next relationship. Credibility may come from the results that you produce. It could come from testimonials. It come from your credentials. It can come from awards or accolades, leadership roles that you've stepped into, media appearances, publications, institutional affiliations, case studies, longevity, referrals, community trust, demonstrated consistency. And this is the thing that I think, particularly with younger generations, that they're not necessarily understanding. That demonstrated consistency is what lets me know that you are reliable, which then lets me know that I can transfer my trust from my relationship to make an introduction to someone else to create your own relationship. But demonstrated consistency is one of the most important and most reliable things that people use to demonstrate whether or not that they are going to leverage their network on your behalf. The final thing is having a recognized expertise. You become known as somebody who has a specific set of knowledge. For me, that's social finance and wealth building for people who are high income earners or high net worth individuals. The problem isn't that many accomplished women possess substantial credibility, but they communicated poorly. They believe naming their accomplishments is arrogant, or maybe culturally they've been told that that's not being boastful is not an okay thing. Meanwhile, someone with one third the experience and twice the confidence is explaining their proprietary methodology on a TED Talk. Credibility hidden in your resume is not fully functioning as leverage. People need enough evidence to understand your relevance, trust your claims, refer you accurately, defend your price, and invite you into the right rooms, as well as see you as a fit for larger opportunities. The credibility translation problem is that a title does not always explain your value. Having the vice president tells me your level. It does not tell me what you've changed because you were there. I know so many people who have very executive titles and they're dumb as a box of rocks. Or I would never want to partner with them. I would never want to be on a project with them. Sometimes I don't want to be in the same room with them. And there are some people I absolutely would go to the mat for. I would do anything for them because they have demonstrated to me not only are they trustworthy, they are credible, they are consistent. And I know that if I attach my name to them by way of introducing them to them or them introducing someone to me, I do not want their name to be soiled. So I am going to make sure that I am respectful of whatever reciprocity that they provide, right? When you say that you're a founder, that tells me that you started something. But what it does not tell me is what you have built, who you shared, what scale you've reached, or what problem you actually solved. Credibility becomes more powerful when translated into outcomes. So here, I'm going to give you some examples. How much revenue did you actually generate, or how much money was actually raised? What costs have you avoided? What program did you launch? What people did you serve? What systems were improved? What partnerships were secured? Teams that were developed? Markets that were entered? Policies that were changed? Risks that were reduced? And recognition that was received. I remember when I was working in manufacturing, one of the things that I was consistent in work at those companies that I worked for was process improvement. I was constantly looking to improve the process by creating efficiency. Now, part of that drive was not because I wanted to necessarily make the company better. It was that I wanted to make my life as an employee easier, right? They weren't paying me well. So knowing that I was not getting paid very well, I didn't want to have to put in so much effort to do the work. The processes that we had would be like 2 hours of process to get to 1 hour of output. And so I really wanted to change that because they weren't paying me well. So how could I actually make my life less complicated as an employee at the company? But it worked out because I then became the person who is really good at process improvement, which I think still lends itself today. When you're doing a credibility audit, here are some questions that you can ask. What have I accomplished that I rarely mention? What measurable results can I actually document? What testimonials or endorsements have I failed to collect? Which respected institutions have trusted me? What leadership roles validate my expertise? What evidence supports my claims? Does my public positioning reflect my actual level of experience? Can someone understand my value within 30 seconds? And that's a really hard one, especially if you've been working for 20, 30 years, because you have this breadth of experience. But at this moment in time, you want to hone in on what's the thing that you want to leverage, what's the expertise that you want to leverage, and boil it down to that, not your full past experience. But the object here is not, do not fabricate authority, but stop concealing legitimate authority in the name of humility. Humility does not require strategic invisibility. Number 5, intellectual property. Intellectual property is one of the most under-recognized forms of leverage, especially among experienced professionals. You may already have intellectual property if you have developed any of these things: a named framework that you created, a repeatable process that you've created, a curriculum, a diagnostic, a workshop, a methodology, a collection of original exercises, a research model, a body of writing, a unique classification system, a proprietary data set, a distinctive way of solving a recurring problem. Maybe it's templates, checklists, tools, or decision models. I remember one of my previous jobs, I was the event producer for our annual conference. I was in a different city every year, and I got so tired of people asking me questions about what was happening at any point in the conference production, that I built this whole entire spreadsheet where anybody could go in and see what was happening at any point in time, and I wasn't being distracted by constantly being having to stop what I was doing to answer questions. I just used that as a mechanism. And when I brought that into my company that I started after I left that job, I remember one person said, "Oh my gosh, there are people who would pay for this." I'm like, "What do you mean? It's just like a spreadsheet of that I use and I've been using it for 10 years." And they were just, this is $1 million, this is gold. And I was like, I never thought about it that way, right? So think about some of the things, especially if you've presented at a conference, if you've created a talk for a conference that you developed, that is something that's repeatable that you can now go out and maybe sell as a keynote speech or a workshop, either in your industry, or maybe it's not in your industry. But I'm just telling you things to think about. How do you leverage what you already know? You don't need a patent to possess valuable intellectual property, but you do need to identify what is genuinely yours and distinguish it from general professional knowledge. Now, here's the buried IP problem. Many people repeatedly create custom work when they have already developed the foundation of a reusable product. I've also been guilty of this. They create a new presentation for every single client. That was probably the first 2 years of my consulting firm. And I had to stop. I was like, it was making me crazy. I'm like, something's got to change. They answer the same questions individually. They teach the same principles without actually naming them. They rebuild the same assessment. I had to really take a long, hard look because what I was doing was actually spending a lot of effort and not a lot of return. That is intellectual property trying to emerge from client work. So here is your intellectual property audit. I want you to review some of the past presentations that you've done, whether they were for work or whether they were for another organization, training materials you created, proposals that you've written, client deliverables that you've done, podcast episodes, articles, social media posts, coaching exercises, assessments, spreadsheets, checklists, facilitation guides, strategic plans, frequently repeated advice that you have given. Then I want you to ask, what ideas do I return to repeatedly? What language or distinctions are uniquely associated with my work? What process do I use across multiple clients or situations in my work? What could be standardized without losing its effectiveness? What could become a workshop? What could become a digital product? What could be licensed? What could another person or company be trained to deliver? What could continue producing value after the original engagement ends? For example, the SOUL framework is not merely content, right? It can potentially become a keynote, an assessment, a workshop, a book. Keep your eyes out. A coaching methodology, a digital learning product, a facilitator certification, a corporate leadership program, a membership curriculum, an event architecture. The framework itself is an asset. It is something that I have created. Now, the strategic question is how to create a commercial system around it without diluting it, right? So I hope you're starting to pick up. Some of you might be asking, well, Elaine, we haven't even talked about money at all. You're exactly right. And this is about me providing you with an opportunity around a wealth building strategy. But I felt that this conversation was super important because if we don't understand what we actually have to leverage, right, then we cannot turn it into something that is going to create optionality for us to create revenue or wealth or income that gets us to our goals, right? Whatever those wealth building goals are. Maybe it's to live in another country. Maybe it's to be a digital nomad. Maybe it's to have a bigger home. Maybe it's to have a compound where all of your family lives on the same property. Whatever that is, maybe is that to never have to worry about medical bills because you are under some strain around health issues. Whatever those things are, we need to understand and clearly and distinctly audit what it is that we may already have instead of looking outside to see I need to go into another network. I need to go get another credential, especially with women. This is a default that we have. We think we need to go outside and we never take stock of what we actually already have. And what we often have is very powerful, and we've underestimated and undervalued what we already possess. Our networks, our connections, our family, the colleagues that we work with who support us, right? Who like us, who want us to win. We fail to realize how much people actually want us to win. I shared this story, but my some of my in-laws have said to me, "Wow, you people just want to give you things. People just want to open up doors for you." And I'm like, there's 2 reasons why. One, I ask. Literally, I ask. But the other thing is that I've demonstrated myself as a reliable person, a consistent person. So people are far more likely and willing to do that for me, make those introductions, open those doors, advocate for me in spaces where I'm not because I asked and because I've demonstrated myself as consistently showing up the same exact way as a trusted and reliable and authentic and knowledgeable with specific knowledge about knowledge base to do that. So that is the 7 categories that we've talked about as far as the 7 categories of leverage. I've given you the questions that you need to ask to figure out where do you sit in all of that, and giving you concrete examples of that you may not even thought of like what questions to ask yourself to get to what are those assets that I have that I can leverage, and how do I ask the questions of where do I go from here? Right? What it comes next. You are listening to the Do Different Better show. I am your host, Elaine Rasmussen. And as we get into segment 3, I'm going to walk you through the actual audit process. It's going to be a little complicated. I'm going to try to give you some visuals through the website. But for right now, I will see you after the break. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I am your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and today's show has all been focused on the L in the SOUL framework, and the L stands for leverage. Now, this whole episode, we've been talking about the different kinds of leverage, and we have not talked about money once, and that has been on purpose. You might be scratching your head thinking, Elaine hasn't talked about money at all, and that is okay. I want you to understand that you don't have to think about more leverage and going out and finding something that's missing, but really taking stock of what you already have to leverage to build some wealth building strategies, right? So let's move into thinking about how do we think about this and how can we audit this? Income is often discussed only in terms in the amount, the number, right? We hear that. And you might even hear, hey, what's your number? What are you trying to get to? But when we talk about for leverage purposes, we also need to examine function. What is your income currently doing? Is it funding your lifestyle? Is it servicing debt? Is it supporting your family and maybe other families? Is it building reserves? Is it acquiring assets? Is it financing business growth? Is it increasing your professional capacity? Purchasing time? Creating future cash flow? Or protecting you from risk? Income becomes leverage when some portion of it is deliberately converted into greater future capacity or ownership. This could include emergency reserves, retirement contributions, brokerage investments, business acquisition funds, education tied to a defined return, not just for education's sake, strategic hiring, technology that reduces labor or creates more, intellectual property development, debt reduction, real estate, insurance and risk management, or experiences or relationships that create legitimate strategic value. Not every dollar must produce a financial return. You are allowed to live, okay? You are allowed to enjoy your money. That's not what I'm saying here. But if every increase in income produces only a proportional increase in consumption, your lifestyle may improve while your optionality remains unchanged. So now I'm going to talk about income audit questions. Here's what I want you to ask yourself. What percentage of my income is currently building future ownership? How much of my income is committed before it even arrives? Am I using income to purchase assets or merely expenses? Where could money purchase time, expertise, systems, or distribution? What financial risks need to be reduced before I pursue growth? What amount can I consistently direct towards long-term optionality? Is my business revenue creating personal wealth or merely financing more business activity? And finally, what happens financially if I stop working for 3 months? Income is a resource. A plan determines whether it becomes leverage. Now, here's the last category, and that's assets. Assets include more than investments and property. For this audit, consider both financial and strategic assets. First, financial assets. That's cash, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, real estate that you own, meaning your home or additional homes or rental properties, business equity, insurance cash value, if that's applicable, ownership interest, royalties, receivables, valuable equipment, contractual rights to revenue. Strategic assets, on the other hand, are brand recognition. And you can have a personal brand, the audiences that you can reach, an email list, community trust, distribution relationships, proprietary data, intellectual property, licenses you hold, technology, systems, operational capacity, institutional partnerships, media relationships, high performing teams, access to decision makers. And then there are personal capacity assets. That is the third category that we frequently overlook. And that is health. Are you healthy? Energy, time, focus, emotional regulation, decision-making capacity, mobility, adaptability, confidence grounded in competence. These are not easily placed on a balance sheet, but their condition directly affects your ability to activate any of the other assets that we've talked about. An exhausted person may possess substantial leverage, but lack the capacity to use it. I remember when I was a single mom with a toddler, I had very limited capacity. That is part of why embodiment follows leverage in the soul progression. First, we identify and activate the resources. Then we examine whether our behaviors, our identity, our standards, our boundaries, and our capacity can sustain the results. Now, let's get into the leverage audit. I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 in each one of these categories. You want to think about what you possess, how you use it, and the current opportunities. And that it relates to your skills, your experience, your relationships, your credibility, intellectual property, income, and assets. And I'm going to have an actual form that you can use that's going to be on the website. Okay. If you're driving in the car, this is going to sound a little unwieldy. And if you're neurospicy, this might seem like a lot. So I want you to go over to the website and get this information so you can kind of see it in a clear one pager, right? But here's the scale. I want you to, number one, we're going to look at largely unidentified and or unused assets. We're going to talk about some resources that are identified but are a little strategic in activation. A 3 is that something that you're using inconsistently. And 4 is you're using it intentionally with measurable results. And number 5, you're systematically activating and producing compounded value. So do not automatically choose the lowest scoring category as your priority. I want you to choose the category where the combination of these 3 factors are the strongest. 1, you already possess something valuable. 2, there is a credible opportunity to activate it. And 3, activation could produce a meaningful result within the next 12 months. Okay, I want you to select one leverage move. Complete these sentences. The leverage category with the greatest immediate potential is, and I want you to fill in the blank. Now, remember, you should have your finance notebook, right? All the things as you listen to the show, all the conversations that we're having, all of your aha moments you're going to put this in your financial notebook, your journal, right? So I want you to answer that question. The next one is fill in the blank, repeat and complete. The resource I have that is underused is fill in the blank. Next, the outcome it could help me produce is fill in the blank. The person, system, investment, or action needed to activate is fill in the blank. Within the next 7 days, I will fill in the blank. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to give you some examples because maybe you might be spinning a little bit. Here's one. Here's a few. I will ask 3 former clients for outcome-based testimonials. I will review 5 years of presentations for reusable intellectual property. I will schedule conversations with 4 dormant professional relationships. And LinkedIn makes this super easy. So you have no excuses because this is available even on the free version of LinkedIn. I will calculate how much of my monthly income is creating future ownership. Here's another example. I will turn one repeated client process into a documented methodology. Here's another. I will update my professional bio to reflect measurable outcomes. I will identify one task to delegate so my time can shift to higher value work. Here's another one. I will create a one-page explanation of my framework. I will ask for one strategic introduction. I will meet with an appropriate financial professional to evaluate how my income is or is not building long-term assets. These are just some examples. And some of these are going to be very tied to your wealth identity and your wealth capacity. So to give you an example, if you're a caretaker and you're assessing your assets and you're doing this audit, something that may come up for you is, okay, what am I doing that is actually flowing into caretaking for someone else that's not caretaking for me? And can I leverage this or a system or a process to be able to either stop doing that, or I have now figured out a way to do that where I can set up boundaries. And that process in and of itself is now something that I can share with the world that can be available and leveraged, right? That's just one example. Your wealth capacity, if you are still sitting in the buffer stage, or you are just trying to build your baseline, meaning you don't even have all of your money is just now going to pay for your mandatory expenses to make your life maintain. Well, again, you have very limited amount of capacity to be able to leverage. So what you might want to be doing now is to start ideating, right? It's never too early to ideate and think about, I have learned some things, and as soon as I can pay down this credit card, I am going to take that money that I've been using to pay this credit card now to now put into my buffer, which will then allow me to now create this opportunity to leverage some of the content that I know or methodologies that I have created. These are just a couple of examples. There are a million more, but I just want to get your juices flowing and thinking about how you want to, no matter what stage of the wealth identity you're in, or what stage of wealth capacity you're in, or whether you're building your baseline, you're building your buffer, or you're building your brick house, that you can start to think about leveling up and getting to that next level that is not reliant on your effort, but is reliant on your leverage. So, as we bring this episode to a close, you do not need to romanticize what you possess. You need to inventory it accurately. And you may discover gaps, and that is okay. This is information. You may need additional expertise, stronger relationships, more capital, or better systems. But do not begin by assuming that you have nothing. I cannot tell you how many times I have to dispel that myth working with clients. That belief keeps accomplished people in perpetual preparation, and you never move off the dime. It sends them back to school when they need positioning. It sends them to networking events when they need follow up. It sends them looking for new ideas when they need to package the ones that they already have. It sends them searching for investors when they have not yet clarified how they will use the money. That one comes up a lot when I speak to entrepreneurs. It sends them toward more effort when the real opportunity is leverage. Your next level may require something new, but before you acquire anything else, examine what your current life has already produced. That is your skill, your experience, your relationships, your connections, your credibility or your personal brand that you've created, your intellectual property, things you've already created, whether tangible or intangible, your income, your assets, your things that you have spent years building, maybe within your job or outside of your job. Now the work is to stop treating them as disconnected facts about your life and begin organizing them into a strategy. Because leverage begins when what you already have is finally given a job. This concludes this episode. You're listening to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Don't forget to send me your comments. Tell me what's landing for you. Tell me what's not landing for you. If there's somebody you want me to interview or there's something you want to tell me how this has helped you, I'd love to hear your stories. But for now, I can't wait to see you next week when I show you how to do different better.